We know that when you lower the barriers to entry, and make public transit accessible and reliable, and you make it free, people will use it. Increased ridership gets cars off roads, which reduces traffic and carbon emissions that pollute our air and warm up our planet. Expanding service also creates good-paying jobs for union workers who will revitalize our aging transit infrastructure and operate the buses, the trains, and the ferries that will connect communities, stimulate the regional economy, and get our residents where they need to go. So as we interrogate and investigate T today, we can also imagine that brighter future, a world where T puts public back into public transit. But you can't chart a new path without knowing where you are now. And as any rider of the T could tell you, the Mbta is a long way to go. Greater Boston's identity is inseparable from the T. It is the lifeblood of the metro region, and for far too long it has not been treated with the care it deserves. Let this hearing today be an honest and unsparing account of the T's neglect, as well as a first step towards making the T a vibrant, prosperous transit system worthy of our Commonwealth and its people. Thank you, Senator Warren, and we thank again all of the witnesses.
Thank you, Senator Markey, and thank you, Administrator Fernandez. I appreciate your being here today. Administrator Fernandez, you lead the Federal Transit Administration, FTA, which is an agency inside the Federal Department of Transportation that oversees the public transit systems across the country to ensure that they provide safe, reliable, and equitable service. I'd like to call on you now for a statement, and then you'll get to the questions that Senator Markey and I have.
Yes, thank you so much. Good morning, Senators Warren and Markey, and thank you again for your attention to the Federal Transit Administration's oversight efforts so that we can improve the quality and safety of the Massachusetts State Transportation Authority's rail system. As is often stated by Secretary Buttigieg, safety is our North Star at the U.S. Department of Transportation, and at FTA, our primary responsibility is really to ensure that people can safely travel through the billions of trips that they may take each year on public transportation. And it's also a responsibility to ensure a safe working environment for transit workers. So we accomplish this in several ways. We invest in the capital infrastructure and rolling stock of transit agencies. We review the oversight provided by transit agencies, by the state safety oversight agencies, which have primary responsibility for the safety of rail transit operators, and conducting detailed examinations into specific safety issues so that we can determine the appropriate action to mitigate those issues. The last point is why we're here today, and it is why FTA began the safety management inspection of the Massachusetts Bay Transportation Authority's rail system. So following that inspection, FTA issued 8 safety directives to Mbta, identifying some areas of concern and that needed safety focus. Importantly, 2 directives were also issued to Mbta's state safety oversight agency, the Massachusetts Department of Public Utilities. By federal law, the DPU is responsible for the day-to-day oversight of the T, ensuring rail operations in the Commonwealth are safe every day, every ride. And transit agencies like the Mbta make the day-to-day decisions on who, what, where, and how they maintain and operate their systems. The safety of the passengers and workers cannot be compromised with any of these decisions. So earlier this year, Mbta experienced a concerning rate of reportable safety events, including derailments, train collisions, injuries, and fatalities. And the pattern of the number of serious incidents indicated that safety risk was headed in an unacceptable direction. So importantly, FDA also became concerned about the efficacy of DPU's oversight of the Mbta. So with those concerns in mind, particularly due to the concerns about the quality of DPU's oversight, we initiated the safety management inspection of both the Mbta and the Mbta's rail operations and the DPU's oversight. The SMI, for short, focused on Mbta's processes, its procedures, and the resources regarding safety decision-making and how the DPU oversees the Mbta's safety performance. On August 31st, FTA issued the SMI report identifying 24 findings, 20 to Mbta and 4 to the DPU in 5 categories. The 4 to Mbta and 1 to DPU that required continued attention and resources from both the Mbta and DPU to prioritize safety and to ensure system maintenance that supports safe operations. At that time, the FDA issued 4 additional special directives to the T for a total of 8, along with an additional special directive to the DPU. And we instructed the DPU to enforce the safety requirements specified in the special directives issued to the Mbta and to also enhance their oversight, including a reassessment of DPU's staffing and capacity. We expect that the DPU and the T will coordinate work to quickly begin developing and prioritizing corrective actions that will address the findings and required actions identified in our SMI report. And that the FDA will continue to monitor and track the Mbta and DPU's performance in implementing the special directives. As the Mbta addresses FTA special directives, it, like all transit agencies, must also consider and adequately support both safety and service. So our report indicated in part that Mbta was not adequately staffed across the agency to meet the demands of both an aggressive capital expansion program and the basic day-to-day safe operation of the system. So properly aligning the staffing of the agency with funding available is absolutely critical. FDA found that the Nbta's operations training department is significantly understaffed, and while recent improvements have been made, additional resources are needed. The path forward for the Mbta is going to require community buy-in. There's going to be disruption to service as they are making the enhancements and changes that they need to make. And I feel that the system is safe and that people should continue to ride it. Yet, tough decisions will have to be made now to create a better, safer future. There will be service impacts to the public, and our SMI inspection of the Mbta has concluded. However, we will continue to monitor safety and will continue working with the DPU to ensure safety. Again, Senator, as you noted, thanks to President Biden and to all of you in Congress for the passage of the bipartisan infrastructure law. FDA received 72% increase in funding, more than $21 billion over the next 5 years, to invest in state-of-good repair of transit assets and systems throughout the United States. Mbta received $450 million in FDA formula funding every year, including $224 million in state-of-good repair formula dollars. And there was a total of $2.1 billion in emergency relief from CARES, CRISA, and ARP. The DPU receives more than $2 million in state safety oversight formula funds each year. And the DPU is also certified and funded by the MTA to conduct proper oversight, and the agency must be accountable in that role. So we will continue investing in transit throughout Massachusetts, work closely with the Mbta and DPU so that we can ensure the highest level of safety for its users and employees of the system. So thanks again for your attention to improving transit through these very shared goals.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Administrator Fernandez. So back in April, the FDA was so concerned about safety issues on the T that it initiated what I think you called a safety management inspection, or SMI, because we got to get a lot of acronyms in here today. And the idea was to get to the bottom of what was going on. And 2 months ago, you wrapped up your inspection, issued a report. Senator Markey and I have that report. The report is publicly available. And today what we want to do in part is walk through some of these findings. But I think that most people in Massachusetts who may be watching this are not that familiar with the FTA's work or its authority over state transit systems. So before we get to your report, I just want to start with the basics about what the FTA does and how you came to write this report. The FTA engages in routine examinations and assessments of how public transit systems all across the country are doing, as I understand this, Administrator Fernandez. But in the most troubling of cases, the agency will take a more active oversight role to ensure that issues are addressed, an unusual step forward. Does that sound about right?
Yes, that's correct, Senator. That is our role. And
Okay.
we do take action when we need to take that action.
And you don't actually oversee the Mbta itself. Instead, you conduct oversight of the DPU, the Massachusetts Department of Public Utilities, Department of Public Utilities, which is the body that regulates the Mbta. Is that right?
Yes, it is, Senator.
Okay, and in other words, your job at FDA is to make sure that DPU is doing its job, and DPU's job is to make sure that the Mbta runs a safe, reliable transit system. Is that about right?
That is correct.
Good. You know, this is helpful because I want to talk about what happened at the T that got us to the point that the FTA had to step in and exercise more active oversight here in Massachusetts. Your August report identifies two major reasons that the FTA undertook inspection. Number one, there was a clear safety problem on the T, and number two, there were big concerns about DPU's implementation of reforms that the FTA had been asking them to make for years. So let's do safety first, Administrator Fernandez. What did the FTA see in the T's safety record that rang alarm bells for you?
Senator, we conducted this inspection as a result of a series of the patterns that we have been observing and the frequency of the safety incidents that were occurring at the T. The patterns of train collisions, derailments, and then of course the fatality and also injuries, both to employees and to the public. And those concerns were exacerbated by the fact that the Department of Public Utilities had not been carrying out their state safety oversight.
Okay, so, and we're going to come to that in just a minute. But what I hear you saying, we've talked about trade sketching on fire, property damage, service disruptions, injuries. We had a death. Your report says that the FTA launched its inspection because of, quote, escalating pattern of safety incidents and concerns, including injury and fatalities, significantly exceeding industry average. In other words, accidents happen all across the country in these T systems. But the question is, how far out of line is the T here in the Boston area? Between 2017 and 2021, the entire U.S. light rail industry reported 13 rail-to-rail collisions, resulting in 48 injuries. Mbta alone was responsible for more than a third of all of the collisions and more than 90% of the associated injuries. But it wasn't just that the T was unsafe. It was unsafe and not getting better. So you stepped in because there were serious concerns. You were about to talk about this a minute ago when I cut you off. Serious concerns about the ability of the DPU, the agency responsible for overseeing the T, to improve the situation. Administrator Fernandez, why did the FTA have concerns about DPU's ability to perform oversight needed to keep passengers and Mbta employees safe?
Senator, going back to 2019, the Federal Transit Administration conducted an audit of the DPU's state safety oversight program, and we issued 16 findings. 9 were closed, 7 are still pending. And the reason that we have not closed the 7 that are part of the corrective action plan is that the DPU has really not demonstrated a positive strategy for ensuring the outcomes of the Mbta's safety responsibilities, that those outcomes are moving in a positive direction. The major issues that the DPU still needs to address is having an adequate workforce with safety experience and having that capacity. They need to ensure that their organizational resources are there to support the work that needs to happen in the field. And then also to ensure that the corrective actions, not only the ones that they're responsible for, but the ones that the T is responsible for completing, are in fact achieving those outcomes of completion, reaching those milestones.
Okay, so the T's safety record was worse than most of the transit systems across the entire country, and the agency that was supposed to be in charge of fixing things had failed to fix the problems or comply with federal regulations for years. Now, is launching this kind of inspection a common action that the FDA takes?
Senator, unfortunately, it's not a common action. However, this is not the first time that we have done a safety management inspection.
So, how many have you done? Do you know?
One more.
One more. So this is the second time.
Second
that
time
the
in the
FDA has
history
ever
of
done one of these. Only the second time in the history of the FDA. So let's talk for just a minute about what you found. There's a lot in this report. I commend the FDA for its comprehensive analysis. I know you came and did on-site inspection, looked at all the records, just at a very high level. Did the FDA's inspection conclude that Mbta's current operations and policies are sufficient to keep riders and employees safe?
Our inspection revealed significant concerns about the T's operations and policies. However, the T has made progress in meeting the timelines and responding to the items that we have flagged for them through the special directives that we've issued. And so they continue to improve the safety culture that was of great significance and concern to us initially. There's a lot more work that needs to be done, and we'll continue working with them to ensure that they can get it done.
Grave concern, but you are seeing some improvement. I want to ask you a similar question about the DPU, which is in charge of the Mbta. Administrator Fernandez, did the FDA inspection conclude that DPU was adequately fulfilling its oversight responsibilities at the Mbta at the time you undertook this?
No, Senator. We found that the Department of Public Utilities have not been adequately engaged in overseeing the Mbta safety management system, which is very important for the delivery of a safe system both for employees and for the riding public. The FDA's report, as noted in our SMI, shows very specific actions that the DPU needs to do to support the field observations, the audits, and the inspections that Mbta's rail transit system is undergoing, so that they can identify safety deficiencies in the same way that we have identified those deficiencies.
All right, I really appreciate this. You know, the people of Massachusetts have lived through these failures, but your report documents that the management failures are even broader and deeper than most of us knew. And I'm grateful to the FDA for stepping in and documenting these failures. Administrator Fernandez, in my next round of questions, I'm going to talk to you in more detail about some of the directives the FDA has issued, but I want to yield to Senator Markey to ask some questions.
No, thank you, Senator Warren. And I just want to follow up on this line of questioning that Senator Warren has been pursuing, because I think your report does represent a staggering breakdown in communications within the Mbta as a result of either confusing guidelines or fear of retaliation. Frontline workers at the T were unable to raise safety concerns with their supervisors, and with Mbta leadership creating a dangerous internal culture that downplayed critical safety risks. So I'd like to have you reflect, if you could, on a couple of stock examples of that. Administrator Fernandez, did the Federal Transit Administration's SMI report, a safety management inspection of the T report, find the Mbta executive leadership received prioritized and actionable information on safety risks?
No, Senator. As reflected in our special directives, the FDA did not find any evidence that from a safety management perspective, that the Mbta safety committees and the meetings that the committees presented to generated any actionable information from a safety perspective in terms of explicit indication of safety priorities and how those priorities were going to be identified and resolved.
Did the FDA's report find that Mbta leadership ensured its decisions related to safety risks were based on analysis of documented facts?
No, Senator, as stated in one of our findings, the SMI final report, in the absence of having a pertinent safety data available at the operational level, and then having that data and information at the executive level, you cannot develop a framework for measuring performance. So it's very important that the information be made available so that they can develop the performance that they need.
Thank you. Did the FDA report find that the Mbta had clear provisions to ensure safety concerns reported by employee safety committees were documented and acted upon?
No, Senator. The FDA learned that the safety information from the safety committees were not formally captured within the Mbta, and that the safety department did not disseminate that information to all who needed it.
Well, one of the few reporting mechanisms for frontline employees to raise potential safety issues is a safety hotline operated by the Mbta. However, the FDA report suggests that even this hotline is not being utilized adequately. Administrator Fernandez, did the FDA report find that the Mbta provided clear direction to its employees on what to report through the safety hotline?
No, Senator. The FDA found no evidence that the frontline employees have been providing not only clarity, but a distinction between things that were should be reported through the hotline and things that were not necessarily needed to be reported through the hotline from a safety perspective.
So at the time of the report, how many calls per month was this hotline receiving?
Yeah, during the time of our investigation, we found about maybe 20 to 25 calls that had been received by that safety hotline.
So that would come out to less than one a day, which is a vanishingly small number to deal with an organization the size of the Mbta. What did the FDA report conclude from the lack of use of the safety hotline?
Well, Senator, of course we can't know exactly the reason that there was such a small number of calls. However, it did signal that there may be some reluctance or skepticism towards the safety reporting environment and what is being done with the information that's provided.
What I found shocking in your report is the conclusion that the Mbta is 1,500 to 2,000 employees short of what they need to do their job on a daily basis. What does that mean in terms of what we now can see in terms of the safety and operational problems at the team?
Well, unfortunately, when there is a very high mandate for delivering service, and you also have capital investment projects that are underway, you need to have adequate staffing. And when the staffing is short, and particularly with those large numbers, that means that individuals who are there are then responsible for doing more overtime, and it results in fatigue, which translates into a safety concern.
So what you're saying is that that this commitment to new capital projects, new construction, then was taking personnel away from the work that had to be done on safety and maintenance, and then that led to kind of a black hole into which all of these safety concerns were falling without any attention being paid.
Senator, what would typically happen is that the agency will be the one making determinations to how they allocate personnel and how they fill vacancies. But in our inspection, we did find that there was inadequate personnel available to do and deliver the level of service that the agency is responsible for delivering every day.
You're saying that it's up to the agency to determine the allocation of the personnel, but the net result was that your safety and management inspection determined that they had left entire areas of maintenance and safety for the team unattended.
Positions that are responsible for delivering service, that is operators and maintenance personnel, that those positions had a high level of vacancies that needed to be filled.
Thank you.
Thank you. Actually, I'd like to follow up from the same direction that Senator Markey is on. You've made clear there's been a failure of leadership at Mbta and DPU that's put riders and workers in peril. This needs to change. I'm thankful that you're there to work on this. But we need to be honest about what these failures look like. So I want to just dig a little deeper into some of the management and operational failures and why they rang alarm bells for the FTA. So Administrator Fernandez, the FTA's inspection found that the Mbta did not have policies in place to ensure that train dispatchers had the appropriate training and certifications to do the job, and that they were properly rested before starting their shifts. So they literally did not fall asleep at the switch. Is that a major risk that the FTA thinks the Mbta needs to fix?
Yes, Senator, among other urgent risks.
Okay, but that one is urgent. All right, let me ask you another one. Because this one's, according to your report, the Mbta has inappropriately stored dangerous chemicals in rail yards, which could put the safety of both workers and the public at risk. Is that a major risk that the FTA thinks the Mbta needs to address?
Yes, Senator, that's a major risk, and we issued a special directive detailing the steps that they needed to take to mitigate that risk.
Okay, since January 2021, the Mbta has reported 5 runaway train events that happened in rail yards or while the trains were receiving maintenance. 2 of these runaway train events actually happened during the FTA's inspection. So, Administrator Fernandez, do these multiple runaway train events pose safety risks for employees and the public that the Mbta urgently needs to address?
Yes, Senator, that is a major risk that the Mbta must address.
All right. And, you know, there's much more that we could do in this. Your list of risks here is staggering. Not collecting basic information to monitor safety concerns, a backlog of 16,000 open and pending defects in need of repair, a leadership with, quote, get it done and go, close quote, mentality, so that it's about patching things up rather than following the safety rules that are recommended. So I'm just going to do one more here. The FTA's inspection found that following changes Governor Baker made to reform the structure of the Mbta board, the DPU may no longer be legally and financially independent from the Mbta as the FTA requires. So Administrator Fernandez, this one is a little different from dangerous chemicals that are stored too close to the tracks or runaway trains. Can you explain why the issue of DPU independence raises concerns for the FTA?
Yes, it is a serious concern to the Federal Transit Administration because it is a requirement under the law that the State Safety Oversight Agency be both legally and financially independent from the entity that it is providing the oversight, that it has jurisdiction to provide that oversight. So in order to provide a proper oversight, the entity needs to be a step away from it so they can look in and make not only the findings, the recommendations, and issue directives for mitigating risk. In our final SMI report, we noted that the organizational structure of the Mbta changed since 2019, and we have required actions from DPU to complete a legal assessment of how that organizational independence from the Mbta is going to be assured.
Well, I just want to say thank you very much. I appreciate the in-depth inspection of the T that your agency has conducted. It is powerfully important to us, and I appreciate your listing so clearly both your concerns about safety and about a punch list for what needs to be done and what needs to be done urgently. I appreciate your partnership in all of these. Senator Markey, do you have some more questions you'd like to finish up with?
I do, thank you, Senator Warren. I'd like to conclude with the discussion about the FDA's involvement with the Mbta going forward and what federal participation will and will not look like in the future. So I just hope that we can set the record straight around a couple of frequent issues relating to the FDA investigation, the idea of the FDA taking over the T, of putting it in receivership, and the concern that the FDA will withhold federal funding from the Mbta. Administrator Fernandez, my understanding is that the notion of federal receivership or takeover of the Mbta by the FDA is not an option on the table. Could you explain why?
Yeah, Senator, thank you so much for asking that question, because we have seen this notion in news reports, and I think it's important that I clarify. The Federal Transit Administration does not have the legal authority to take over the day-to-day operations of any transit agency in this commission.
So the FDA does not have the legal authority to take over the T, off of its federal receivership. And even if it did have the authority, the FDA would not have the capacity to manage the Mbta. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So there will be no federal receivership or takeover
Of the day-to-day operations.
in that case, what will the FDA's involvement be going forward in getting the Mbta back on track?
Our involvement will be to continue providing that oversight to ensure that both the Mbta and the DPU complete all the corrective actions under the safety directives that we've issued.
So my understanding is that the FDA only withholds federal funds from transit agencies in extremely rare circumstances. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So what steps do the Mbca and the Commonwealth of Massachusetts need to take to ensure that no federal funding is withheld from the Mbta?
Beginning with ensuring that they satisfactorily complete all of the corrective actions under the special directives that were issued as a result of our inspection from April through June of this year.
So at this point, is the FDA withholding any funding from the state or from the Mbca?
No, the Federal Transit Administration is not currently withholding any funding from the state.
So just to reaffirm, the Commonwealth needs a functioning, independent safety oversight agency outside of the Mbta. And so long as the Commonwealth has that functioning safety oversight agency, it is highly unlikely that any federal funding will be withheld. The federal government will remain a partner in fixing the T, including the $580 million that Senator Warren and I and our federal delegation worked so hard to provide to the Mbta this year, but the FDA alone does not have the power or the authority to fix T. The Commonwealth of Massachusetts must fix the T. The FDA is a willing partner. We must fix it here. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Administrator Fernandez. I really appreciate your being here. We've now concluded the first panel. We're going to take a very short recess. I'm going to gavel out so that we can change the setup here, and then we'll be right back.
Hey, Paul. Hey, did you find one?
No, that makes sense. I don't mind hitting Jay, but never hitting you. You know I love you, Dan. Well, if I get desperate, I just show up. You know what? I just really want to sit next to you. Let's hang out. Can you just pass me that bag right there? Plus, my bag is here, so that can be used. I just want to cheese sticks. Spend a week if I was talking to you while you were in the bathroom and you were not there. So, and someone else walked in and I was just like, I'm just going to shut up. I'm a functioning adult. So it's just. I didn't dump it. I dropped my phone. I have it. Am I the only one who thinks about it? It's been a day. I just like fight it. No, I don't care. I'm sitting on the floor. I expect to be climbed over. I didn't even notice. My favorite moment was Mike Lynch like literally climbed over this crotch in my face to get on the air for breaking Red Sox news. I'm just like, fine. Nice to meet you, Lynchy. Grew up watching somebody and meet them by childhood icon destroyed. I finally met Mike Lynch.
So now we're going to hear from four witnesses on this panel, our second panel. Let me introduce them. First, I'm pleased to introduce my good friend, the Honorable Michelle Wu, Mayor of the City of Boston. Mayor Wu has been a tireless fighter for Boston's families and for safer, cleaner, and more accessible transit. Okay, thank you. I am so glad to be with you in this fight. Thank you for being here, Mayor Wu. Next, we have Mr. Jared Johnson, the Executive Director of Transit Matters, one of the fiercest advocates for more equitable and reliable public transportation for metropolitan Boston. Mr. Johnson is an expert on sustainability and on proven best practices to promote more convenient and effective transit. So thank you for being here with us, Mr. Johnson. Next, we have Mr. Matthew Nelson, who has served as chair of the Massachusetts Department of Public Utilities since 2019. As chair of the DPU, Mr. Nelson is responsible for overseeing the Mbta. I appreciate your accepting our invitation to testify before us today. And lastly, we have Mr. Steve Poftak, who has served as general manager of the Mbta since 2019. Mr. Poftak, I appreciate your coming here today also to address these safety issues. Thank you to all of our witnesses. I'll start by turning it over to Mayor Wu for her statement. Mayor Wu, you are recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Senator Warren and Senator Markey, for convening this hearing and for your leadership. When Boston began building the first subway system in the country in 1895, the idea was labeled dangerous and radical. Business owners organized an anti-subway league, warned that construction would disturb snakes and rats underground and force everyone to the surface, spreading fear and disease. And there were thousands of signatures collected against the, quote, great disadvantage and damage to business that would result. Now, thankfully, decision makers look to the future. We could not imagine our city today without our public transit system. The nation's very first subway tunnel today runs from Park Street to Boylston Street still. It took tremendous innovation then to electrify trolley cars, to run underground without suffocating coal smoke, and it reshaped what growth looked like in our city and our country, as more people were able to escape the traffic above ground and reach their destinations en masse. Today, we must continue investing in our future to make Boston a city for everyone, green and growing, where families can thrive. And we are so grateful for your partnership and that of the Biden administration in deploying necessary resources for our collective recovery. Our ARPA funds have gone to getting our economy going again with our small businesses, building affordable homes, pouring into our school communities, creating thousands of green jobs, and we will stretch every dollar from the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and Inflation Reduction Act. But none of that matters if residents can't rely on public transportation to get where they need to go. We are here today because all that investment in housing creation, excellent schools, economic development, safe and healthy communities is constrained by the state of public transit in Boston and in Massachusetts today. I'm someone who's been taking the T for decades as a college student, then a young professional, then a mom pushing a big double stroller through those Mbta elevators, buses, and trains to get to childcare. So this isn't a theoretical discussion for me and for all of the commuters in the system. Wednesday morning, I took the Orange Line to work, grateful that it was back in service, excited to board a shiny new train at Forest Hills, and the ride went really smoothly. But there were still 12-minute headways at peak rush hour, 12 minutes until the next train would leave. After an unprecedented 30-day shutdown of our busiest subway line, riders still hold our breath and cross our fingers when we step into stations and look up to see when the next train will arrive. Now, in recent weeks and months, the T has acted with more urgency than we've seen in years, and I'm grateful for that leadership. But my experience as a commuter, like so many others, is still emblematic of a broader systemic problem. For too long, our approach to public transit has focused on fiscal management on the backs of riders and workers at the expense of long-term vision and sustainability. The result is a system constantly on the verge of collapse, one that directs all of our energy toward meeting basic safety requirements rather than growing and expanding public transit as critical infrastructure. If we want Boston to be the thriving, competitive global city that we can be, to meet the possibilities and opportunity of this moment, we can't continue to sabotage ourselves by taking a piecemeal, reactive, bare minimum approach to transit. The people of Boston and Massachusetts deserve safe, reliable, accessible transit, but that has to be the starting point, not the finish line. Our transit system today is not equipped to meet the needs of our growing region. Restaurants and small businesses are desperate for foot traffic after years of economic hardship. Large employers are struggling to get workers back in person, and they're facing staffing shortages across every industry because people can't afford to live close enough to walk to work and don't want to deal with a stressful, unreliable commute. As a hub for healthcare and life sciences, innovation and education, our possibilities are endless here if we could just connect all our communities to the opportunities and where they need to go. This requires a strategic vision for the T, one that secures long-term sustainable funding, establishes a workforce development strategy, expands access and affordability, and ensures that communities most affected by the system are the ones empowered to shape it. That means a direct voice for those who know the system best, an Mbta board seat for Boston and another municipality, commuter rail fare equity, electrification starting with the Fairmount line, fare-free buses, and accelerated progress on the Red Blue Connector and West Station. Thank you so much, and I look forward to productive conversation today about turning the T into a source of pride and connection for all our residents.
Thank you, Mayor Wu. And now, Mr. Johnson, I turn it over to you for 5 minutes.
Thank you. The Mbta is a key part of the success of Greater Boston. One only has to look at the cranes adding millions of square feet of housing, office, commercial, and lab space right next to Mbta stations. A report by A Better City found that through travel time and cost savings, savings from avoided vehicular crashes and injuries, savings, and also reduced carbon emissions, the Mbta provides an estimated value of $13.2 billion a year to the Greater Boston region. This is a value to transit riders and non-riders alike. That value is also 6 times more than the T's annual operating budget of over $2 billion. The T is also hugely important on a human level and is essential for social mobility, equity, and cohesion. According to AAA Northeast, the average cost of car ownership in the Commonwealth is $10,728 a year. The ability to live without a car or share one is a significant savings, especially for low-income and moderate-income households. A Harvard University and quality, the abysmal state of good repair and safety concerns, and leadership that has substituted austerity for vision, and we are now suffering the consequences of that failed approach to transit operations. T-riders deserve more than what the T's acting CEO called, and I quote, a more manageable and palatable level of interruption. Riders deserve service that is frequent enough and reliable enough to avoid lost wages, and importantly, they deserve to know that their public transit system is safe. Riders deserve to know when they're going to have a fully functional, slow zone-free transit system and what steps it will take to achieve this goal. Mbta employees deserve leadership that is working tirelessly to improve their quality of life and works collaboratively with labor to address worker shortages. Businesses deserve a transit system that enables customers and employees to reach them conveniently, reliably, and sustainably. And the region deserves a transit agency that provides high-quality service for today and one that has a vision for how to grow and modernize to meet tomorrow's needs as well. The team needs leadership that can address the long-standing needs and expands access in order to drive mode shift and shorten travel times for environmental justice communities. Our climate, our economy, and our fight for transit and economic justice cannot wait. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you for being with us, Mr. Johnson. I appreciate it. Mr. Nelson, I recognize you for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good morning, Senator Warren and Senator Markey. I appreciate the opportunity to testify. Power, natural gas, water utilities in the Commonwealth, and we are also charged with developing alternatives to traditional regulation, monitoring service quality, and regulating safety in transportation, steam distribution, and gas pipeline areas, as well as the siting of energy facilities. The DPU is comprised of a number of different divisions, including the Consumer Division, Pipeline Safety Division, Electric Power Division, Transportation Network Companies Division, Gas Division, and a Transportation Oversight Division. Today I'm here to talk about the Transportation Oversight Division, which serves both a consumer protection and a public safety function. It primarily regulates safety practices of common carriers used to transport passengers to properly include trucks, railways, buses, and household moving companies, as well as towing companies. The division also licenses complaints regarding driver violation and accidents involving department licensed common carriers. Additionally, and most pertinent to the subject of today's hearing, is our Transportation Oversights Division, Rail Transit Division, which serves as the Commonwealth's State Oversight Agency, or the SSOA. It is a rail fixed guideway for public transportation system. The only such system in Massachusetts is the Mbta. Federal regulations 49 FR 674 outline the SSOA's responsibilities for overseeing the safety of the system and assessing the effectiveness of public transportation agency safety plan, the ASP, in ensuring safety. The chief activities of the Rail Transit Division can be divided into 3 general areas. First, accident investigations. Second, ongoing monitoring of safety practices. And 3, monitoring of large capital delivery projects. Our Transit Division has on staff 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, to respond to accidents and incidents. While on scene, our staff takes notes, photos, and meets with Mbta personnel to get an initial sense of what has happened. We then conduct an investigation of the incident from beginning to end with the purpose of ensuring that Mbta's investigation into the cause of the circumstances of the incident are sufficient and thorough. In addition to responding to incidents, the Rail Transit and Safety staff observe the Mbta's day-to-day safety practices in compliance with its own agency safety plan. Last year, the Rail Transit staff conducted 472 oversight activities, including document reviews, rule reviews, record reviews, field observations conducted on on-site Mbta properties, as well as the implementation of processes and procedures referred to in the agency safety plan, as well as interviews with Mbta employees and inspections, meaning that the DPU observes the Mbta's officials conducting a safety activity or inspection, and the DPU will evaluate the Mbta's compliance with the procedures and the standards. The department also oversees certification of large capital delivery projects like the Green Line Extension and the Green Line Train Protection System. The Mbta has its own safety certification process for capital projects, and the DPU must observe and verify that the Mbta follows its own safety certification process of new construction. In carrying out these functions, the division operates under a set of general applicable principles. The Mbta is also responsible for the development of the procedures and protocols. The DPU is responsible for the safety oversight to ensure the fulfillment of the safety functions. The DPU takes its responsibility to ensure safety of riders and the Mbta's transit system very seriously. and we have been working closely with FTA and with Mbta to implement the FTA's recommendations as outlined in their final safety management inspection report issued on August 31st, 2022. The department agrees that with the actions and the directives of the FTA are necessary for enhancing public transportation in our rail transit division, and we are actively recruiting and continually posting jobs. The department is dedicated to our efforts in these areas, and we look forward to working with the FTA and the Mbta to ensure drivers receive a safe and reliable transportation system. And thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. Mr. Potak, I recognize you for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Senator Warren. Thank you, Senator Markey, for the opportunity to testify today before the committee. As the oldest transit system in the country, the Mbta is a system of incredible complexity. And every day, the hardworking, dedicated employees of the Mbta serve, at this point, more than 700,000 customers per day. Over the past several months, and indeed over the past year, the Mbta has faced a series of incidents that have raised concerns about the safety of our system. I want to state unequivocally today to the committee and to our customers that the system is safe, but we can and will do better. I am committed, just as I know all the employees of the T are committed, to continuing to make the T a safer and more reliable transportation system. And I look forward to sharing with this committee the significant progress we've made and will continue to make towards that goal. We take our role in riders' lives seriously. We get people where they need to go, to grocery stores, medical appointments, school, jobs. We do it through blizzards, during parades, on holidays, and the Mbta did it throughout a pandemic that forced us to continually pivot on a sometimes day-to-day basis, rethinking our transit services as ridership plummeted, all the while with the goal of providing safe and reliable trips for our riders and protecting the health of our riders and employees. As riders return to the system now, I understand the frustration many of them feel. I'm one of them too. I took the Orange Line in today. On behalf of the more than 6,400 hardworking men and women of the T, we acknowledge that safety incidents have occurred and that our service levels are not where we want them to be due to staffing challenges that have forced us to make difficult but appropriate decisions that prioritize safety above everything else. Safety has been and continues to be our top priority. In 2019, the Fiscal Management Control Board commissioned a report with the full support of Mbta management by an independent safety review panel. All Mbta employees were fully engaged and candid throughout the process, and we embraced the opportunity to review our safety processes and to begin to make changes in our safety procedures, many of which we accomplished. Much as we embraced the process under which the safety review panel was done in 2019, we've fully supported and collaborated with the FTA during the SMI process, which is focused on the heavy rail portion of the Mbta system. We have had multiple meetings on a daily basis and continue to do so. On June 15th, the FTA identified 4 areas that needed attention, that they considered to need immediate attention, and we were able to respond by producing corrective action plans that have been approved by the FTA and indeed have begun the process of implementing those corrective action plans and are actually awaiting their verification of some of the initial ones that we have done. When the SMI, the full SMI came out in August, highlighted some additional concerns, particularly around workforce levels, and we absolutely agree this is an area where we need to do better. We are not alone in our staffing concerns. Peer agencies across the country are struggling similarly to staff up our ranks with fully trained, fully certified employees, and we will continue to work on that, and I will happy to get into that in greater detail, some of the steps we've taken. I just want to close by saying that we fully accept the FTA's safety management inspection, and we are continuing to work cooperatively with the FTA to not only develop the corrective action plans, but then to implement and execute them. I also want to register that we are fully committed to fully funding all of the actions required to remedy any and all safety issues that the FTA identifies. So I want to thank this committee again for the opportunity to speak, and I look forward to a discussion about what has happened here at the Mbta and what we are doing about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Potak. So everyone who's been paying attention recognizes that there are big safety problems with the T. The string of dangerous and deadly incidents over the last 2 years rang alarm bells. But even so, the findings of the FTA investigation of the Mbta and the Department of Public Utilities were shocking. The FTA found problems in both agencies from top to bottom. Mr. Poftak, you've been the Mbta's general manager since January 2019, almost 4 years now. So the problems we're discussing here occurred on your watch. I just want to read one of the FTA's findings about the Mbta's safety culture. I heard you say safety is our top priority. But here's what the investigation from the FTA found. I quote, Mbta's executive management, that's you, does not consistently ensure its decisions related to safety risks are based on safety data or documented facts. I nearly fell over when I read that. That is the bureaucratic way to say that your safety decisions are just made up. So, Mr. Poftak, what led the FTA to make such a strong statement about your safety decisions and your leadership?
I think what they have called for with their special directives, and you see it marbled through a number of them related to safety management information and safety communication, that we need to develop a more robust system of data analysis. Right now we have, for the first time, we initiated it last year, for the first time we do a monthly presentation of our safety data. However, much of it is backward looking, and one of the things they're calling for are more forward looking measures. And I think that's an area where we need to become more sophisticated. We are also, we've embarked for a long period of time on implementing a safety management system. One of the 4 pillars of that safety management system is risk management and assessment. And we have built up that capability in a safety department that has doubled in size since 2019. So that is an area, I believe, where we are making progress. The FTA's finding, I think, clearly signals that we need to make a more robust project, and in fact lays out a series of steps by which we can do that.
So I just have to ask though, how can we be nearly 4 years into your term and you're just now deciding that you need to collect accurate data and need to have a way to use that data to lay out meaningful safety plans going forward?
I think that the Safety Review Panel report in 2019 was a real turning point where we began to more aggressively pursue that. Again, I think the findings of the safety management inspection are a clear signal to us that we need more robust systems and we need better data.
Well, I'm hearing you say you have known you have a problem since 2019. And the FTA is saying, and that problem is severe and urgently needs to be addressed. Let me ask you about the action items on the FTA list. The list of necessary reforms that the FTA identifies is staggeringly long. It contains 53 specific action requirements. So that report came out in August. It is now mid-October. How many of these action items have you completed to date?
We are still in the process of producing corrective action plans.
I get that, but you've got 53 items that need to be addressed. How many of them are now finished? How many are checked off the list?
I don't know that off the top of my head. What I was hopeful to explain was that we are still in the process of developing corrective action plans that we submit to the FTA, and then they either approve or they ask for additional information. So in fact, the last set of corrective action plans that are responsive to the special directives that you have laid out in front of you is actually due tomorrow, and we'll be submitting it today. So
does that mean none? The whole list of 53 is still out there?
Not none, but I
But
do
you
not
don't
know.
know the
I
number?
don't know the answer off the top of my
Well-
head, and I would note that many of these corrective action plans are not sort of a binary flip the switch. They are a multi-year process of addressing some of the issues, and we intend to take it very seriously and do a very thorough job of addressing it. So I'd love to be able to come in and get all 53 and say all 53 have been checked off. The nature of the work that needs to be done is much, I would say, much deeper and more detailed. And if you were to do it in a short period of time, it would not be done
Well,
properly.
I take issue with some of this because I've read what these are. I think moving chemicals to a safer place is not something that should take place over a long period of time. This is a real safety risk. So let me ask the question, though, the other way. There are 53 action items that the FTA has identified as urgent safety concerns. By what date will you have these completed? I want the public to be able to rely on this. We want to be able to check this and have some real accountability.
We're still working that out with the FTA, waiting for their approval on a number of these. So I can't put forward a date on something that
Well,
the
all right,
FTA hasn't
let's
signed off
assume
on.
they say this is the right approach. When are you going to have this done?
It truly varies from corrective action plan to corrective action plan.
Well, are you going to get some of them done right away?
Yes, absolutely. We will get some of them done right away. I don't have a specific number off the top of my head. Some of them will take much longer. Some of them will be multiple years in their execution.
You know, I just want to make clear, making these safety changes is not optional. It's a matter of basic safety for your workers and for your riders. And that means that we need to see that these have occurred. And we need them out there where they're transparent, where people can see them. So I just want to take a look here at your records. Your chair, at what we're doing on this, we need to get this information and we need to get it fast on this correction. Mr. Nelson, I want to take a look at your records. You're chair of the Department of Public Utilities, which has primary oversight of the Mbta. You've been at the helm since January 2019, almost 4 years, almost exactly as long as Mr. Poftak has led the Mbta. It is your job to make sure that the Mbta is doing its job, and you are failing. Again, according to the FTA, the DPU does not use its resources or its authority to effectively identify and address safety issues. The FTA concluded that, quote, DPU has not demonstrated an ability to address Mbta safety issues and concerns. Translation, DPU is not capable of doing its job. So, Mr. Nelson, let's break this down. When did you begin to understand the extent of the problems at the team?
FTA conducted their audit in 2019, and we received the final report of that 2019 audit in December of 2020. We became aware of some of the findings of that report through draft conversations with the FTA, where they highlighted things that they wanted us to address. So I would say in 2020, we started to find indications of where FTA was marking areas that DPU needed to improve.
So I just want to make sure, because
Sure.
you're the front line on oversight here. So you didn't realize that the T had any of these problems that the FTA documented for you until the FTA came forward at the end of 2020 and said, here are the problems? What were you doing in those first 2 years? This is your job, is to oversee the Mbta. Where were you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's a fair question. And the answer to that question is the department, when we took an assessment of the situation on the Mbta, we started to develop a hiring plan to bring more and new people into the unit, the rail safety unit, in 2020. Right, we developed it in 2019 and we started bringing people in 2020. We had a management change in 2020 as well. I brought in a new director and I have a new assistant director to take over that program. And we hired additional staff. We got up to, I think, 11 FTEs. Because I think one of the themes you're going to see throughout the entire FTA report is the department needs more of a presence to oversee all these activities and all these actions.
So wait a minute, I just want to get the timeline straight here. So for 2 years, at the beginning, this is the 2019-2020, FTAs come in, they identify all these problems, you didn't even know any problems exist. starting in December of 2020, you now say, okay, we see the problems, we've got the report from the FDA, so we start hiring people. Now, the problems obviously continue. The FDA comes in and in a matter of weeks writes up a report that identifies at least 53 actions that the Mbta needs to take. Where were you during that second 2-year period?
So, again, I think it's not that we weren't taking any actions. I mean, the department took a number of normal enforcement actions.
Well, the FTA obviously thinks you not only didn't take action, but you're not even capable of taking action. And I want to understand what you understand is why the DPU drew that conclusion.
Drew what conclusions?
The conclusion that you're not doing your job and that you're not even capable of doing your job.
I think that the answer to that question is the department in of itself needs to do more to oversee the actions that have happened on the Mbta. There were a number of, you highlighted in your letter to me, there were a number of collisions and derailments that occurred that set off alarm bells at FTA and at DPU. We were on site on every one of those accidents. We've taken action on some of the green line speeding incidents that occurred that led to a passenger car colliding with another green line. And so we've been taking actions outside of the SMI.
Obviously, you have not taken enough action.
I'm not arguing that we have.
And the
we need to do
FTA
more.
cannot come in and find the kinds of mistakes it finds if you had been taking action. And I just want to underscore this.
Sure.
If you can't identify what's wrong from the past 5 years, then how can anyone in Massachusetts have confidence that you're actually going to fix this going forward? You know, you are the chair, Mr. Nelson,
Sure.
so let me just ask about what's going on here. Your background experience is with natural gas and electric power divisions, nothing to do with transportation, is that right?
I worked for the Department of Public Utilities in both the natural gas division and the electric power division, as well as the Bureau of Labor Statistics.
Okay, and my question was nothing to do with transportation, is that right?
Correct.
Correct. And Robert Hayden and Cecile Frazier are the other 2 commissioners, is
That's
that right?
correct.
Hayden's primary experience with the department is in pipeline safety, and Frazier's background is in energy and utility industry, is that correct?
Yep, and she has a sighting background as well.
And neither has a background in transportation, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, so none of you, none, has any experience in transportation or transit safety and oversight, is that right?
In specifically transportation safety,
Yeah.
that's not our background.
Okay. I'm concerned because I think part of the problem may be here that you don't understand what your job is. In your recent testimony to the legislature's Joint Committee on Transportation, you stated, quote, "We are an auditing department,"
Sure.
end quote. And you also said, quote, "We have done what we are required to do," end quote. You say you have no additional responsibilities here, but the Federal Transit Administration obviously sees this differently. In its report, the FTA said, quote, "While DPU has the authority to require Mbta to take expedited action to implement its SNS and address other safety concerns, the agency rarely invokes its authority to compel such action," which doesn't sound like they think your only job is as an auditor. So how do you reconcile your claim that you did the job you were required to do with the federal oversight agency's assessment that you did not?
So, again, to those questions you were quoting, I think that when I was referring to we've done everything we've required to do, there's nothing that the FTA has asked us to provide that we have not provided. That was the context there. The DPU certainly, fundamentally here is what I think the problem is. Our role is to oversee and regulate Mbta safety. We do that primarily through being in the field, observing their actions, making sure they have a comprehension, making sure people are trained, making sure people are working the hours they're scheduled to work, make sure that we can go on site both scheduled and unscheduled, ensure that we look at all the activities in the rail yard, that people are following the procedures. Historically, right, prior to 2018, the division was run in a reactive way, where we would wait for an accident, we would investigate the accident, analyze the root cause, and ensure that whatever was the cause wasn't happening again. FTA rightly has changed to a proactive approach. The proactive approach is...
Mr. Nelson,
Yeah.
let me stop you there. If you're gonna make the argument that you've been using this great proactive approach and changing from 2018, and since you came in 2019, you're using a much better approach, you're not
I'm
gonna
saying
succeed
FTA
with
is-
this argument. You are going to fail in this argument. The
that was
FTA
not what I
has
said.
made clear, you are not doing your job. You know, look, I appreciate that these are tough problems, and there are a lot of reasons why safety risks on the T have grown over time. But the only way out of this is with accountability and leadership failures from top to bottom that don't acknowledge where the problems are and put real action plans in place, not just to fix these problems over some indistinct timeline into the future, but actually where you're holding yourself accountable to the public and saying we're going to get this much done by this date. If we don't have that, then we are not going to have a T that gets better, that gets safer, and one we can depend on. And that's just not acceptable. People of Massachusetts are entitled to that. Senator Markey?
Thank you, Senator Warren, and thank you for your line of questioning, because what we're hearing is staggering. And it's pretty clear that at least two things have to happen. One is that the Mbta needs to meet the FTA's specific action requirements swiftly and comprehensively to ensure the safety of the T. And two, the DPU needs to start taking seriously its safety oversight of the Mbta. I agree with Senator Warren. The DPU has not been a watchdog. The DPU has become a regulatory black hole into which all of the safety issues fall, even though they're supposed to be identified and then cleared up in terms of the operations of the Mbta. And that has not happened. There is a huge regulatory black hole that exists. And now I'd like to open up a third item. The Mbta needs to clearly and transparently communicate with the public. Simply put, I think it's been alarming to the T's riders how often the Mbta has not communicated simple facts about its operations or its safety incidents. And I'd like to focus on a specific example, the Orange Line shutdown. Mr. Pavkak, on August 19th, when the Orange Line shutdown began, you said that the shutdown that the T riders would have to endure would guarantee a faster service on the Orange Line. At a press conference on September 13th, 6 days before the Orange Line was supposed to reopen, you said the Orange Line will get faster. The only caveat is that it's going to take a couple of days. But according to Transit Matters data, Mr. Johnson's organization, that has not been the case. Before the shutdown, residents traveling from my hometown of Malden to Boston's Haymarket Station on the Orange Line could plan for about a 13-minute trip. Currently, nearly 1 month after the conclusion of the Orange Line shutdowns, that trip is taking about 21 minutes. A shocking 60% increase in travel time. Mr. Johnson's head is nodding. Mr. Pavkak, is service faster on the Orange Line since the shutdown?
I think you've empirically demonstrated it's not. And the statements that I made were based on the work that we did as part of the search. And that work was successfully completed, and the places where that work was done indeed have had slow zones lifted. what I failed to communicate, and I'll take responsibility for this. What I failed to, I think, fully comprehend and then fully communicate in a way that was digestible to the public was that our track engineers, as part of their work, not only inspecting the work that had been done on the track in that stretch, and it's really that stretch from North Station to Assembly that is the one that has the most significant slow zones. In the course of doing their work, they identified other areas that they wanted to work on, and they felt like it was important to work on those areas previous to the winter, where a track repair is significantly more difficult. And indeed, that work is now underway. It is being done, it's typically being done on the overnight, but you need to have a slowdown in place in order to do that work. I failed to properly communicate that. However, I do continue to stand on the principle that I want my track engineers to feel that they have the agency. If they identify something that they want to work on, regardless of whether or not we take a hit in terms of public credibility, the priority has to be safety, and we will continue to prioritize safety. Obviously, it has come at an expense with our customer base in terms of credibility.
So I live 5 blocks from the Malden station. Malden High School last year, 25% white, 25% black, 25% Latino, 25% Asian. In other words, your constituency, a changing constituency, and one that is very dependent upon continuing. You see young people going to Bunkie Hill Community College, UMass Boston. They're using the T to go to work in a restaurant in Jamaica Plain. The Orange Line runs from Malden to Jamaica Plain. And so that becomes a way in which people can get educated, can go to work, can visit their relatives. But it's essential that it be working. So the Mbta does not release comprehensive speed data so that those people can understand how fast it's running. They should not be dependent upon Mr. Johnson and his organization. We thank him for doing it. Will you commit to releasing data on average train times on the T so that the public can see it in the same way they can see how long it takes for a plane to take off and actually land, and have some idea as to what adjustments their families are going to have to make? Will you release data on average train times on the T?
I think that's a fair request, yes. We will release data on average train times.
Okay. I think that is absolutely essential for families. So the extra travel time is actually now affecting families in a dramatic way. A 60% increase in the time it takes for them to travel is very significant. The next question which I have is, from my perspective, is there a point at which the Mbta has overpromised? And what went wrong with the Orange Line? And why wasn't the problems with the Orange Line in terms of the completion of the work that you said you were going to complete in that 30-day period communicated to T riders so that they could make plans that were adjusted to the much longer time that obviously it's taking to complete the Orange Line? Why was that not communicated to the traveling public?
I think, just to be clear, everything that we said we were going to do during the 30-day surge was done. There was additional work that was identified. I think there was a failure. In internal communication to fully comprehend the impact on our riders, and a failure on my part, not only to that comprehension, but also to communicate it in a way that was broad-based and effective. I know we've had a bunch of sessions with various media members, but clearly the message did not get out in a way that was digestible to customers, and I acknowledge that that has a customer-facing impact.
Okay, on September 13th, you said that during the shutdown, you were finding 6 critical slow zones along the Orange Line, adding, we are confident that we can get those 6 pulled off. In the past week, You acknowledge that the Mbta is continuing to work on the Orange Line, including efforts to alleviate slow zones between Tufts Medical Center and Back Bay stations. The Mbta also said last week that it still needed a machine to go over the newly replaced track in order to ensure it is properly settled. To me, that sounds like critical work to alleviate the slow zones, which you stated would be done during the month-long shutdown back in August and September. If you knew the shutdown was not going to fully fix these slow lanes and get the Orange Line back to full speed, you should have communicated that to the public at that time so that they could understand what the impact on that line was going to continue to be. Why did you not do that? Why did you not give all of that information at that time to the public?
I draw a distinction between two things. There was the 6 zones that we identified, where indeed the work was completed and we have been able to lift the slow zones. There is additional work, some of it somewhat adjacent to at least one of those work areas in the North Station to Assembly Square area that became follow-on work that I think we talked about in some detail. And then there's the distinction between, we were able to lift the slow zone on one of the sections between, we define slow zones as a 10-mile-an-hour speed restriction. We were able to lift it to 18. We are now working out a process with the FTA about what additional work we would need to do to get up to a 25-mile-an-hour, which is sort of the as-constructed speed. So we have lifted the slow zone from 10 to 18, but there's an ongoing discussion, and then there'll be a work plan to follow to get to that 25-mile-an-hour posted speed.
Right. And my only point is, you should have just said that. People of Malden could understand it. You need more fasteners, you need more machines to be able to ensure that the tracks are settled. Just tell them that. But you didn't do that. You know, they were assuming it was going to be faster because you said it was. So, let me ask you this. People want a specific date. On what specific date, Mr. Popka, will service on the Orange Line be faster than it was before the shutdown as promised?
And I cannot give a specific date because that is dependent on not only field conditions, but also the judgment of our field staff and our inspection staff. And I feel that it is my duty and my responsibility as a leader of this organization to prioritize safety. And if I put a date in place, it doesn't prioritize safety. It puts pressure on field staff to make a decision that is not based on what is the safest condition in the field. It forces them to make a different decision. And so I regret that I can't give you a date, but I hope that explanation gives some texture to why.
Mr. Popek, following this hearing, will the Mbta publicly release a list of the work that still needs to be done to get the Orange Line up to full speed? Yes or no?
Yes, we can do that.
You can do that. And I think that is critically important because I don't think we're talking about days or weeks. We're talking about months before the Orange Line is running faster than it was before. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator Markey. So the persistent safety issues of the Mbta and failures of the Mbta leadership and the DPU leadership to address them have a serious impact on hundreds of thousands of riders who depend on the T to get around the city, to get around the region, and on the T workers who work to make that possible. So I just want to spend some time talking about the consequences of the DPU and Mbta's failures for Massachusetts residents and communities. Mayor Wu, you are an Orange Line rider. So from your experience riding the T of the last few years and where you sit in the mayor's office, how have the T's safety issues, what kind of impact have they had on commuters and on the city of Boston and the region generally?
Well, the most obvious and devastating impact is the injury and loss of life that has been highlighted, and unfortunately not in infrequent stories and situations. And this has been, as we've discussed, driven by a lack of clear safety culture and decades of deferred maintenance and vacancies and staff shortages that have pulled the existing hardworking staff in multiple directions. Riders should not have to wonder when you're getting on the T in the morning to go to work or trying to get home whether there's a question of if you'll make it back to your family. And that has daily quality of life impacts for our residents when people aren't sure if they're going to get docked pay or are struggling to make plans or making important life choices about whether or not to stay in the region, whether companies can locate here. When we can't trust, when our confidence is shaken, when ridership goes down, that means more traffic for everyone. That means the entire region is paralyzed. And so any question of safety hurts our residents and it hurts our economy.
Thank you. We know that when public transportation systems break down, the burden does not fall equally on everyone throughout the region. Vulnerable communities are disproportionately harmed by reduced service and extended delays. In fact, Mayor Wu, I think you pointed out in the past that Black bus riders spend 64 more hours on average on stalled buses every year than white bus riders. And this is why safe and reliable transit is so important for addressing economic inequality and racial injustices. Mr. Johnson, your organization, Transit Matters, has led the charge for convenient and equitable mass transit for metropolitan Boston. How have the Mbta and DPU's failures to adequately fund, manage, and oversee our transit system worsened transit access for underserved communities?
Residents in under-resourced communities are more likely to be hourly workers or be in precarious employment. And so the unreliability, the service cuts, and even the poor planning in relation to the Orange Line shutdown literally took money out of the pockets of these folks and left some of them vulnerable to termination. And so, we also think about, low-income residents who use the bus to transfer to the subway. So they've been hit heavily hard by increased headways on both modes. And critically, as Mayor mentioned, the fear of unreliability or concern for safety has pushed a lot of people to drive. And so, for low-income people, that means either higher costs, or for bus riders, that means more traffic and longer bus commutes.
That's a very powerful point about the impact all the way through the system. So the Mbtas and the DPU's failures to competently manage and invest in the T have left many families without safe and reliable transit. And if this incompetence continues, the T is going to see more shutdowns, more delays, more crowding, more derailments, and potentially more accidents. Mayor Wu, you often talk about safe, reliable, affordable public transportation as the foundation for our shared prosperity and growth. What do you think we need to do to make sure that the Mbta equitably connects Bay Staters to the resources they need and to each other?
We need a clear vision, proactive, strong leadership, and the determination to get it done by prioritizing our communities, the riders, and everyone who's impacted by the system. That means not just funding, safety, and maintenance, and talking about why we can't do things or why we haven't, but really ensuring that we are pushing beyond that to the projects that need to get done, accelerating, building the credibility and faith in the system by looking to give clear commitments on where we're going to go and when we will get there. And so fundamentally all of that, and I know the general manager has one of the most difficult jobs anywhere on the planet, and this is coming after decades and decades of getting us to this point. But there are still ways in which, even today, changing the HR practices, really focusing in on hiring. We were proud to partner and help host a job fair on City Hall Plaza for the Mbta, but there are thousands of vacant positions that need to be filled. The wages need to be higher to attract people to those roles so that we can begin to chip away at the currently unacceptable wait times and headways.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I think you're exactly right. This is about leadership, it's about vision, it's about having a plan, and then it's about executing on that plan and some real accountability for that execution. That's what people in Massachusetts deserve. Senator Markey, you have some more questions?
Yeah, please. Thank you, Senator. Mr. Popczak, in addition to the 1-month closure of the orange line and the partial closure of the green line, which is still in effect, does the Mbta currently have any plans to shut down other lines, the red line, blue line, other parts, or the green line?
If the question is, do we have a plan to do a full line shutdown? The answer right now is, we have things that we're thinking about over the next year, but the answer is right now we don't have any definite plans. If I may be so bold as perhaps the subtext of your question is, I know there was kind of a community conversation and some rumors, and I think some premature posting on our website about a red line shutdown, a long-term red line shutdown in the later part of this year. There will not be such a shutdown. There may be periodic, much smaller ones on the weekends. We're doing some weekend shutdowns now on the Braintree branch, for instance, in the early evening to get additional track work. So we will use much smaller diversions, but if the question is, will we do anything on the scale of the orange line? Right now, we do not have any current plans to do that, but we will share them, and to Jared's comment, we will attempt to share them with as much advance notice as possible.
Okay, well, all I'm really advising you, sir, is to just communicate, put it out there, just let people know. Maybe we'll 2.5 weeks notice. Then a major transit line, the orange line, is going to be shut down for a month. That's all she got for notice. And that's just wrong. The city depends upon that out of it for its proper economic and social function. And maybe I think one of the, silver linings of this, an unexpected success coming from the orange line shutdown, was the city of Boston offering free 30-day passes to the Blue Bike share system for the duration of the shutdown. Can you talk a little bit about that and what we might have learned about ourselves because of that shutdown?
Our teams at the city worked really hard to not only try and support the work happening with the T and make that possible underground, but to imagine new possibilities and try to push so that people had every possible option. We were expecting with free Blue Bike, 30-day free Blue Bike passes, that maybe 8,000 or 9,000 people might take us up on that. It ended up that 60,000 people claimed those free passes. It was 300,000 rides taken during that period, which was a 50% increase compared to that same period last year, with hardly any notice, as you said. Before the shutdown, the Blue Bike system's daily ridership record was just over 18,000 rides in one day, and during the shutdown, it was 27,000 rides. We set 9 different daily ridership records, just breaking the records day by day by day in just that period. And so bikes can move people across Boston if we have the infrastructure, if we take down barriers. And it's worth noting that the biggest surges were actually during weekends. So people are needing to get around, not only to get to work and make those critical investments, bring home salaries for their families, but to spend money at our local businesses, to enjoy, to keep dollars flowing in our local economy. And so not just the social connections, the business connections, the local investments, that is all important. We need to make sure that we're using every avenue of public transportation.
Yeah, so this is actually a remarkable story because on the busiest days of the free rides, Blue Bikes were transporting the equivalent of 2.5 bus lines, or a quarter of all of the orange lines on a daily basis. So how important is it for us now to consider the funding of free bikes for people, seeing what this last experience has just revealed to us about the interest and the adaptability of the people in Boston.
It's an essential part of our infrastructure, and the demand is there, the appetite is there. We are working as fast and hard as we can at the city level to make that infrastructure safe through design investments and street choices, but removing financial barriers, as you see, with everything else constant, immediately has an impact. And I want to thank you for your leadership alongside Congresswoman Presley for ensuring that at the federal level that conversation is moving. This is exactly why we need it. When you lower barriers, you can open up whole new avenues for people to get around.
Yes, Senator Warren and I and Congresswoman Presley, we're committed to partner with you to accomplish this goal. The city of Boston has been undertaking several other experiments in fare free transit, including making the 23, the 28, the 29 bus route free for 2 years. Why did you choose those routes?
Those are three of our busiest routes through the city of Boston. The majority of riders are designated, low-income riders. They're also vast majority serving riders of color and run through our neighborhoods that are on key economic corridors. We have seen that access to affordable transit is one of the greatest predictors of social and economic mobility, as Mr. Johnson was outlining. And so this is not only about reducing the financial burden, but connecting everyone to opportunity and ensuring that the buses move faster as well. We've seen benefits on all fronts.
Yeah, Mr. Johnson, you and your organization are the conscience of our community for transportation. Do you think the Mbta has been doing enough to advance fare equity?
Not as much as they could have. There have been some great steps, but the T could be doing more to promote fare equity. They could look at instituting fare caps when they introduce their new system, and that is where riders who can't afford a weekly or monthly pass are guaranteed that they will not pay more than that pass amount, even if they're going on a pay-as-you-go basis. The T could also significantly lower commuter rail fares, which would help low-income people who are displaced from the city and long-time gateway city residents. During the shutdown, I think an additional 8,000 riders a day took advantage of the commuter rail because it was essentially free or the same price as the subway within zones 1 or 2. And the T should even look at a fare cut, perhaps even have subway fares match bus fares, stimulating demand and as a way to really sort of demonstrate to sort of make things better.
Thank you.
So let's talk a little bit about the future. The FTA report does not cover either buses or commuter rail, but there's a lot of work to be done there as well. And with the right vision, the right leadership in place, we can make the overall system of the Mbta safer, more reliable, more equitable, doing things like investing in bus and commuter rail electrification, expanding service, making sure everyone can afford to ride. So earlier this year, I met with the Environmental Justice Corridor Coalition, a group that was convened by Senator Brendan Crichton, and it includes state and local officials that represent Lynn, Chelsea, Revere, Everett, and several of the North Shore communities. Our discussion focused on how this investment would improve service, how it could reduce long-term maintenance costs, how it would help us meet our climate goals, support housing development, and address traffic congestion. It also would create new jobs, promote regional economic prosperity, and advance environmental justice. So, Mr. Johnson, your organization has been one of the foremost advocates for electrification. You personally have studied electrification extensively and become an expert on this. Let me ask, how much would it cost for the T to electrify its commuter rail network?
Well, with competent project management and using some of the same techniques from the last successful and relatively affordable electrification of the Northeast Corridor from New Haven to South Station, that estimated cost would be about between $3 and $5 billion. And so, yes, the upfront capital costs are higher than alternatives and diesel, but the long-term savings and the benefits to communities and the environment are huge. It's also important to note, too, that many of the Mbta's locomotives have a failure rate of every 5,000 miles, which is about 25 times less reliable than even mediocre electric multiple units. This is because the trains have fewer moving parts, and also many of the T's passenger coaches are outdated, and a majority of the $10 billion state of good repair backlog is on the commuter rail system. So electrification isn't an add-on, it is state of good
So more money up front, but bigger savings over a longer period of time, right? And, you know, you gotta pick your moments for making the big changes. Right now, Commonwealth has a substantial surplus. The Commonwealth is receiving, actually the Mbta is receiving $580 million in new federal funding from the bipartisan infrastructure law for new projects. We've got the Inflation Reduction Act, where money's coming in to try to help us move to green. Let me just ask, Mr. Johnson, how would investing in electrification boost the local economy and support historically underserved communities in Massachusetts?
Yeah, electrification of the commuter rail system is key to the state's greenhouse gas emission reduction goals. Scientists have pointed out that even with electric vehicles, we cannot reduce our greenhouse gas emissions without dramatically reducing driving. Electrification of commuter rail would drive mode shift with faster, more reliable trains. And electrification also allows us to run more frequent service. Commuter rail runs through many environmental justice communities, either without stopping or with fares that are too high. In electrifying the system, we must foreground equity, and this means adding stops in environmental justice communities, lowering the fares, and ensuring that we have a diverse labor force that is modernizing that system. So, again, if we're going to achieve the state's climate roadmap and further equity, transportation has to be a key part of that, and it's also going to be critical to support the housing growth that we need to have in communities across the state.
Right, and this is the moment. You know, instead of continuing to pour more and more money into dirty, unreliable technologies from the last century, we can actually replace broken down trains with electric ones, have more electric buses, cleaner for the communities that they go through, and exactly as you said, add more stops, make sure it's affordable, and it helps enrich the entire region. So, does the T currently have plans for electrification, Mr. Johnson?
So the T is working towards bus electrification. The T does need more capacity to accelerate this work. The bus garages themselves are a critical roadblock for electrification. But we can't stop there. Obviously, in order to have the system that we need to have in the future, we need to work on electrifying trains. And for that, the T does not have a comprehensive plan. The T has long passed self-imposed deadlines to begin working on commuter electrification, and is instead pushing unproven and unserious solutions that will not deliver the full benefits of electrification. And critically, we know this because the governor strangely intervened in the legislature's bond bill to contradict the T's own planning efforts.
You know, I have to say on this, I'm very glad we're making progress on buses and electrifying buses. It's exactly the right thing to do. But I'm mystified why there's no plan in place to do the same in commuter rail. It would mean a faster, more reliable, and over time, a more cost-efficient way to provide transportation. It's a win-win on so many levels, and we should be using this moment and the resources available to us to implement that vision. It would make a difference for generations to come. So Mayor Wood, I'm going to do my last question with you. Would expanding T service to new parts of Boston and to surrounding communities help our city grow and help better serve families throughout the region?
Unequivocally, yes. That question is music to my ears. For Boston to be a city for everyone, we are all in on being a green and growing region. And sometimes we see all the new growth and it's not enough. We need more affordable homes. The reality is Boston's population used to be even higher. 70 years ago, we were over 800,000 people, and we want to get back to being able to have the infrastructure to support that equitably. But all of our decisions now, the planning that we're doing in Boston, the housing creation, the schools that we're investing in, it all hinges on being able to have a reliable, world-class public transit system. The T at its core is about investing in jobs and education and healthcare and housing for people who previously didn't have a way to reach that. So I think we need to look to the previous maps that existed. You'll see former versions of plans had a much broader reach for the system. Even on many of our lines, the current endpoints were never intended to be the endpoints for those lines. And so we have to get back to that sense of ambition and possibility, and know that this would grow our economy, strengthen our communities, and really advance equity.
Yeah, I very much appreciate your putting that vision forward. I want to thank both of you. you and Mr. Johnson, for your advocacy for the T and your leadership and your vision in this area. You know, we're talking about safety, and these are terrible problems that must be remedied immediately. But we can't let that be the end of our ambitions. This is a moment when we can talk about expanding transit throughout the region. And there are so many advantages to doing this. And frankly, the costs are just too damn high if we don't do it. So we need to seize on this moment with the leadership, with the vision, with the plan, with the resources to make the changes that will help us be the region we want to be, the Commonwealth we want to be in the 21st century. I want to thank you for being here and being part of this. Senator Markey, do you have any final questions you want to ask?
If I may, thank you.
Please, of course.
Thank you, Senator Warren. And, you know, we've come a long way since 1900, you know, the dawn of the T. Back in 1900, there were a grand total of 4,000 internal combustion engine vehicles in the United States. That's all we had. But there are a lot of horses. Horses for 6,000 years up until that point. Been the mode of transportation on the planet and in Boston. And it was getting to be a pretty big public health issue. As we were going up to 800,000 people, and horses were the means of transportation. So we moved to the internal combustion engine after 6,000 years. The life expectancy, if we do it right, of the internal combustion engine is running out now. You know, it might have lasted somewhere between 130 and 150 years. By 2050, we don't want to see it on the streets anymore. Okay? They pollute, they harm the planet, and we have solutions that are in place. Senator Warren and I, we fought hard and included $116 million for the Mbta as part of the FTA's low and no emissions vehicle program. That grant is going to go a long way towards purchasing 155 new battery electric buses to support the Mbta's transformation to a zero emission fleet, which they aim to do. Maybe Mr. Johnson, maybe you can talk about that and why that's just a good start, that we have a lot more to do.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think some of the steps that the T can take are, you know, commit to full bus fleet electrification in the 2030s. So that means, again, increasing that capacity so that the T can deliver multiple bus garages at a time. That's developing a realistic plan to electrify commuter rail and prioritizing low-income communities and communities of color in that planning. But also, I think what's really important too is that the T should work with community development corporations, workforce development agencies, public housing, the city, to develop an electrification workforce that reflects the ridership and helps us advance economic justice for low-income communities and communities of color.
So the bottom line is we need the T and everyone across the region to see public transportation with a longer-term both-and approach. Yes, we need to prioritize safety and ensure that there's fiscal health for the organization and how it runs. But that can't be at the expense of having a clear pathway to getting the things done that in the end save us money and are basic for our health and wealth as a community.
Yeah, and you are the Green New Deal mayor, and your goal is to make us the greenest, cleanest city in the United States and the world. So we want to obviously be as helpful as we can be to you in order to make it possible for you to implement your vision for the city. I think it's very important. There's a kind of a back to the future quality to this. When I was a boy, I would have to walk up to the Bellsway to get onto the trolley car, which was electrified, to take me and my mother and father into Sullivan Station and then on to downtown Boston, and for me then up to Boston College. Of course, that was an hour and 45 minutes, by the way, each way. But it was there if you don't have a car. My father would get off at the Hood Milk Company in Charlestown and Sullivan Station using the electrified trolley. But a big decision was made: pull up all the electrified trolleys and let's just make it very safe for internal combustion engine to take up every single bit of space along the highway. And now there's a kind of a reflection that we're thinking about how smart some of those people were a long time ago in terms of looking at electrification, realizing the lower levels of pollution. And that's really what we're committed to doing. So I guess what I would ask, Madam Mayor, are there other steps that you want the team to take in order to move more quickly, in order to be able to implement your dream of the city?
I think the general manager knows my list well. There are a couple of them that I've been harping on for some time. I think what I'd like to emphasize is that there are big projects that are going to take time and resources, and just listen to Jared on every one of those. But there are things that can be done in the very, very immediate short term as well. Fair equity on the commuter rail system could be done tomorrow and would likely boost ridership on the commuter rail to then ease the congestion and the load and burden on other forms of transit and on traffic as well. Moving to expand our fare-free bus pilot, thinking about how the city of Boston and another municipality have a direct seat in the governance structure through the legislation that is up at the State House right now, that would be a game changer for how we move forward, even starting right now.
And Mr. Johnson, just want to give you a chance to echo what the mayor just said about equity, about justice, about ensuring that we have a cleaner, fairer system.
Absolutely. I would echo the points that Mayor Wu made, but I think one of the first things that we've got to do too is we have to address the headways on the subway and the bus, and so that means whether that's working with the FTA on newer drug testing that's conscious of the fact that marijuana is legal in Massachusetts, working with local community colleges to get more people into the pipeline. Again, working with labor to have some collaborative solutions on how we can raise pay, improve working conditions, and get people started at full-time pay. And I think one of the other things is the team needs to move towards a 24-hour system. Not only will this help third shift workers and hospitality workers, some of the lowest income folks in our community, but it can also be part of the solution for bus drivers. Right now, it's can't get to a bus garage if you don't have access to a vehicle all the time for an early shift. And again, echoing what Mayor Wu said on the fare system, we have to have a simpler and cheaper fare system. A great example is in Lynn. 2/3 of the people in the immediate station area around Lynn are low income, but less than 10% of the ridership on commuter rail is low income because of those fares. That's something the T could do tomorrow. And then finally, addressing the connectivity and some of the commitments that the T needs to honor to environmental justice communities. So things like the mayor mentioned earlier, Red to Blue Connector, advancing the great work that the T and the city are doing along Withheld Ave, addressing the Mattapan line, and again, just thinking bigger about what the T can accomplish. Thank you.
So thank you, and thanks to both of you for giving us a vision for more just, more equitable, more sustainable, and more efficient public transportation system in the city of Boston and the model for the rest of the country. Thank you so much, and thank you, Senator Warren, for bringing this hearing to Boston at an extremely important time in our history.
Well, thank you very much, Senator Markey. You're always a great partner in these things. We held this hearing because it is crucial to understand what is going wrong so that we can remedy it and move forward to something not just a little better, but a whole lot better. The people of the Commonwealth deserve a reliable transit system that works for them and works for their families. And to achieve that vision, we need new leadership from top to bottom. We need people with experience who will listen to the voices of workers and riders and other local partners. Senator Markey and I are committed to being good partners at the federal level, and we will continue to fight for funding for transit. But the state has to use that funding responsibly. Ultimately, the governor has the authority and responsibility to hold accountable the entire chain of command at the T. The current governor is leaving, but the incoming governor will have an opportunity to step up with a vision, a plan, and a willingness to hold T management accountable for turning that plan into a reality. If we truly commit to it, I have no doubt that the Mbta can once again be a leader in public transportation for our entire nation. I want to thank all of our witnesses for being here. Senator Markey and I want to hear from our Massachusetts constituents on the issues that we discussed today. You can go, anyone who wants to, can visit my website at warren.senate.gov to share your comments about these issues, and they will be included in the official record of the hearing. Questions for the record are due 1 week from today, Friday, October 21st, and for our witnesses, you will have 45 days to respond to any questions. So thank you